don't know about you, but my day's already going better since we've been singing to the Lord. Isn't that an encouraging time of worship? Well, without a doubt, the resurrection of Jesus Christ is the turning point of all of human history. We spent the first part of this year following Jesus to the cross, and then on Easter morning, we only began to celebrate, right? We were just getting started, his victory. Now we're following the ripple effects of the resurrection. We're paying close attention to what happened after the resurrection because we're realizing our job is not simply observe and understand what God has done in the past in the earth, which we read about in the Bible, but we're realizing that God is calling us to merge our lives into his great story. The resurrection sent shockwaves through the universe, through all of eternity. And today, 2,000 years later, after this has happened, we're being personally invited by the risen Lord to join him in the great redemptive work that he has for us. Our scripture passage today is going to be very important because we're talking about something that everyone has to deal with, something that all of us have to face. Today we're going to be talking about what we should do with doubt. Let's go to the text. Let's just dive right in today. John 20, starting in verse 24. We're picking up where we left off last week. John 20, 24 says this. Now Thomas, also known as Didymus, one of the 12, was not with the disciples when Jesus came. So the other disciples told him, "We've seen the Lord." But he said to them, "Unless I see the nail marks in his hands, and put my finger where the nails were, and put my hand into his side, I will not believe." Now last week, hopefully you were here because we had so much fun. We saw our risen Lord having fun as he got to surprise his disciples in resurrected form. We left off last week with Jesus appearing to a large group of the disciples, and after they were done freaking out, Jesus opened their minds to what the Scriptures had always said about the Messiah. Jesus connected the dots for them, and for the first time they were able to see a vision and a calling and a life that was so much bigger than what they had seen before that moment. But for whatever reason, Thomas wasn't there when that happened. He was noticeably absent. And so, of course, when he returned to his group of friends, he finds them freaking out. He's alive! He's alive! All is not lost. In fact, all is gained. Jesus defeated death, man! He's alive! But Thomas is not having any of it. Unless I see the nail marks in his hands, put my finger where the nails were, put my hand into his side, I will not believe. Thomas must have thought that the disciples had seen an imposter or a doppelganger or at least a really talented Jesus impersonator. There is no possible way, he thought. There is no possible way Jesus could be alive. Despite the fact that all of his closest friends and all the people that he trusted more than anybody in the entire world were freaking out that they had in fact seen Jesus, Thomas refuses to believe. Unless I can see the holes and touch them, put my hand into his side, I'm not believing it. Now, we could beat Thomas up here for his doubt if we wanted to, and many preachers have, but I won't for two reasons. First of all, up to this point, Thomas has been nothing but a role model for us. He left everything to follow Jesus. Earlier this year in our series called Lead Me to the Cross, we had a brief encounter with Thomas, and if you happened to be there that week, hopefully you remember me saying, remember this, because coming up many weeks away, we're going to be talking about Thomas. Well, here we are, talking about Thomas today. It was almost right after the turning point in the Gospels where Jesus turned and set his face to Jerusalem when this took place. We're going to jump to John 11 briefly here. John 11:5, just to review. Now Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus. So when he heard that Lazarus was sick, he stayed where he was 2 more days. And then he said to his disciples, let's go back to Judea. But Rabbi, they said, a short while ago the Jews were there tried to stone you, and yet you're going to go back? His disciples are like, Jesus, we can't go to Judea. It's too close to Jerusalem. You go to Jerusalem, you're going to die. They were right, weren't they? Verse 14. So then he told them plainly, Lazarus is dead, and for your sake I'm glad I was not there, so that you may believe. But let us go to him. Then Thomas, also known as Didymus, said to the rest of the disciples, let us also go, that we may die with him. Thomas was the one who was encouraging the 12. Thomas was ready and willing to die. He certainly wasn't going to let Jesus die alone. Thomas was not a chicken. In fact, he was a hero in this instance. So that's one reason why we're not going to pick on him. He deserves some respect, I think. And the second reason we're not going to pick on Thomas is because Thomas saw what happened to Jesus. Each nail that was driven into his hands and into his feet is a horrible memory still locked into Thomas's mind. He saw the abused Jesus covered in his own blood, hanging lifeless, dead on the cross. Not only that, it's possible he was a witness when they drove a spear under Jesus' ribcage to make sure that he was in fact dead. And when they pulled that spear out, Jesus was drained of all of his water and all of his blood. Thomas may have seen that. What a traumatic memory to be haunted by. What his dear friends were claiming was quite simply impossible. Impossible. And to act the way that they were acting, it was painful for him to even entertain the idea that Jesus was in fact alive. It just brought him more pain. Let's read ahead in our story. Now we're back in John 20, but we're just going to read verse 26. A week later, his disciples were in the house again, and Thomas was with them this time. A week goes by, a whole week from the first sighting with the group. The disciples began that week freaking out, he's alive, he's alive, he's alive, and then an entire week goes by. And I wonder if Thomas wasn't feeling a little bit vindicated with each passing day. See, I knew I was right. I saw Jesus dead on that cross. There's no way he visited my friends last week. No way. I also want to make a real quick side comment here. A week went by. You know, one thing I've realized is that God is never in a hurry. And there have been all kinds of seasons in my life when really important, sometimes intense, sometimes even stressful things are going on. And I want to have a resolution. And a week goes by. Or 2 weeks, or a month, or 6 weeks. God is never in a hurry. We don't like waiting on God, do we? But that's our problem, not his. His timing is always perfect. So now back to 26. A week goes by. A week later, his disciples were in the house again, and Thomas was with them. Though the doors were locked, Jesus came and stood among them, and he said, "Peace be with you." Can you imagine Thomas's face now in that moment as he's frozen? How long did it take for his mouth to thaw, you know? The doors were locked. The disciples are hiding. Jesus appears in the room and he says, "I'm back." No, he doesn't. I keep mistranslating that. He says, "Peace be with you. Shalom be with you." The word for peace means all is well. Everything is okay, brothers. Peace is one of my all-time favorite words in any language, and it's especially beautiful when Jesus is the one speaking peace over you. It's a very good thing. Jesus appears in the room, and Thomas just stands there like he has been frozen. And the first thing that Jesus does is he makes his way through the crowd. He walks right up to Thomas, and he says, "Thomas, put your finger here. See my hands? Reach out your hand, put it into my side. Stop doubting and believe." Thomas said to him, "My Lord and my God." Jesus knows what we're thinking. He knew the state of Thomas's heart, and so he confronts Thomas's doubt head on. Can you see Thomas's trembling fingers as he reach out and he touches the precious hands of Christ? Can you see him slide his finger over the holes at the bottom of his hands? And then Thomas's poor heart breaks with joy and with wonder and with relief. And he unabashedly cries out, "My Lord, my God." What an awesome moment. Now Thomas is going to be one of the ones running around telling the entire world, "He's alive. He's alive. I've seen him." And some will believe him. Some will doubt him. But there are no more doubts in Thomas's mind. Can you imagine the other disciples after that? "We told you so, man. We told you so." It's one of those times you don't mind being wrong, right? My favorite verse of the day is the end of verse 27. Stop doubting and believe. Jesus calls us to that. We're going to return to that before we're done. Thomas has had this intense and very joyful reunion with Jesus, and then Jesus says, "Because you have seen me, you have believed. Blessed are those who have not seen and have yet believed." Blessed are those who have not yet seen Jesus and believe. We are blessed when we put our faith in Jesus, aren't we? We are blessed when we believe. The road to a blessed life leads through belief, not doubt. Now, doubt is something that we all have to face, and we're going to talk about it. But the blessings of God only come through belief. So you have to step into that to experience it. Now, before we pull back and talk about all the dynamics of what we've just read, I want to leave something here in our minds for next week. Peter was here in all of these stories that we've been reading. And Peter has a weight on his heart, doesn't he? He denied even knowing Christ 3 times. And not only did Jesus predict it, but Jesus also witnessed Peter's abandonment. And since that moment, Peter hasn't called himself Peter anymore. He went back to the name he had before Jesus named him Peter. He went back to Simon. He didn't feel like he was worthy of Peter anymore. So while Thomas is our focus today, please take note that Peter's here for all of this. He is so excited to see Jesus appear, but he's also bleeding on the inside. His heart is deeply wounded by his own epic failure. And so Peter is going to be our subject for next week. Thomas is famous for his doubt. And if that's fair or not, I don't know. But he gives us a wonderful opportunity to talk about something that plagues all of us from time to time. Doubt is something that's normal. It's normal. We all experience seasons of doubt. If handled well, doubt actually becomes a vehicle to a stronger faith and a closer relationship with God. Because we fill in the gap of some lack of knowledge, and we had a doubt, and then that gap gets filled, and now we're walking closer than ever before. Just like Thomas was walking very closely and strongly when his doubts were removed. If handled poorly, a little tiny doubt can grow into a huge problem, and it can even sink the ship of your life. Before you know it, your faith will sink like the Titanic because you neglected to deal with your doubt. Doubt is normal. In fact, I think not having doubt every once in a while is kind of abnormal. Why is doubt a normal part of life? We're going to go kind of deep and kind of broad here at first. One of the reasons that we doubt, one of the reasons why, is because of the claims of our faith. At first, the claims of our faith don't appear to be super normal. For example, Jesus was born of a virgin. That's not normal, right? We believe in a God that is everywhere, all at once. That's not very normal. We believe in a God who is good and who's not malicious or capricious. Think about the gods that the Greeks and the Romans were worshiping. They were petty. They were fickle. It was like reading soap operas when I had to read about that in college, right? And most of all, they were sinful. But our God is good. Our God is righteous. Our God is even holy. And holiness is not normal. Not to us. Sometimes you can make a list of all the things that we believe because it's what the Bible tells us, and you might think, this stuff does look a little crazy. But here's the thing, we're able to call that crazy because we get so comfortable in the miracle of our own reality. We start looking at the claims of the Bible as if those are abnormal, kind of crazy. And we think, how could we believe in something so preposterous? And then we get into a season where I think I'm doubting my faith right now. Before we accidentally kick you into a new season of doubt here, do me a favor. Look in the mirror just for a second. I'm meaning metaphorically. You aren't normal. You aren't normal yourself. How many of you this morning have been consciously telling your heart to keep beating? Isn't that incredible that we have a muscle that never gets rest and we're not in control of it whatsoever? How many of you were able to get a great night's sleep last night and were at the same time able to consciously tell your heart to keep going through the night? You didn't even think about it, did you? Do you realize how incredible that is? How many of you today have been consciously telling your lungs to breathe in oxygen and expel carbon dioxide out of your body? Have you had to consciously tell your lungs to do that? Of course not. And it does it for you, doesn't it? That's a miracle. That is not normal. That just doesn't just happen. How about the fact that at the moment of conception, half of your DNA and half of your spouse's DNA bring a unique human being into existence. And while they're made out of both of you, they're unique. And they're their own, right? You can see yourself in them, and you can see your spouse in them, and then they do things, and you're like, where did that come from? That's not like us. And maybe the easiest way to talk about that is just in the realm of food. Sometimes I'm eating something amazing and delicious, and my kids are looking at me like I'm a freak. You like that, Dad? Well, yeah, you don't? Come on, man. Or sometimes I'll see my kid walking through the house just eating something raw that I would never eat, right? And I'm looking at them like, whose kid is that? So he takes parts of us, and yet we're able to create someone unique. It's a miracle. How many of you are telling your hair to keep growing? Oh, your hair just keeps, some of you are saying, keep growing for the love of the Lord. Nothing. And I'm probably going to go bald now because I just said that. That's a bad news for me. How many of you tell your eyes to see? You know, how is it that we have these tiny balls of tissue in our eye sockets that are collecting light and our brains are able to turn that into vision? That's nuts. It's a miracle. It blows my mind. How do we have these little things in our ears that vibrate? And because of that, we can detect sound. Right now, it's happening in your head. You're not in control of that. Where did that come from? Isn't the gift of sound incredible? How are we able to have water pour out of our faces whenever we're sad or whenever we're happy? Have you ever stopped and thought about how incredible the human body is? How abnormal it is? I mean, it's incredible. Do you realize how crazy the idea of human life like this is? The fact that there is life at all should astound us. What we think is normal is actually exceptional. I geek out about this all the time, and allow me just one more example. The human brain is a supercomputer that we have not yet been fully able to understand, and this supercomputer is organic. It's made out of dirt. How does it work? It's incredible. All of us, when we're done with our rentals, when we're done with these bodies that are alive, we turn into dirt. Come on. That's crazy. That is not normal. We have these miracles living in jars of clay. Do you realize right now that the earth is spinning 1,000 miles an hour? And we're not going flying off? You ever have a friend, or you, there's no, highway patrol here, go up to $100 on the $100 miles an hour on the interstate? It's kind of freaky. When you're driving, you feel in control. If someone next to you is going 100 and they have their hand on the wheel, it's not as comfortable, right? If you want, I can take you out in my minivan sometime. We'll do a solid 88, maybe. It's going to be a speed trap on 40 now all week because of me. But no, you know how weird it is to go really fast in your car. Take that times 10, and that's how fast we are spinning on our axis. And you know, as we're spinning 1,000 miles an hour, you know what else is happening? We're flying through space. 66,000 miles an hour. 66,000 miles an hour. While we're spinning 1,000, we're flying around at 66,000 miles an hour. We're at just the right angle for there to be human life on the earth. We're kept at just the right distance from the sun as we fly around at crazy speed to make sure that life is possible on our planet. So you guys, there's nothing about our existence that is normal. The fact that everything that I said is true is kind of unbelievable, isn't it? I haven't felt the speed of 1,000 miles an hour going around. I'm not feeling the speed of 66,000 miles an hour flying through space, but it's real. The starting line, and the reason I'm talking about all of this, the starting line in a battle against doubt always begins at the lowest possible level. And that level is acknowledging that all of this, the human body, the earth and its orbit, everything I described, the atmosphere that we have, and weigh all the different gases, how much there are of each of them is perfectly locked in so that there's life. Photosynthesis, the water cycle, all of that proves that there is an intelligent creator behind it. None of this was an accident. And so before we begin to doubt the biblical claims that we have, we at first at least have to start at the level of an agnostic. We all have to admit that we exist because of a supremely intelligent design, by a being so large that he dwarfs the entire universe. If you can't believe that, in my humble opinion, you're either blind as a bat or you have not taken a meaningful look at the universe at all. To see everything that's available for us to see and know about things that have been created, and to not see intelligent design, that takes a lot more faith to me than it does to believe in a creator. It takes a crazy amount of stupid, foolish faith to deny everything our eyes can actually see that's been made. Here's an amazing but intense passage from Romans chapter 1 I want to read to you. 1:18. The wrath of God is being revealed from heaven against all the godlessness and wickedness of people who suppress the truth by their wickedness. Our sin suppresses the truth. Since what may be known about God is plain to them, because God has made it plain. Verse 20, for since the creation of the world, God's invisible qualities, his eternal power and divine nature, have been clearly seen, being understood from what has been made, so that people are without excuse. Whew. No one can stand before God at the end of their life and say, you didn't reveal yourself to me. You didn't show yourself to me. How dare you judge me, God? I didn't know you existed. All God is going to have to say is, did you not open your eyes? That whole time you were down there, did you not open your eyes? No one can give God an excuse for their lack of belief, because God has revealed himself to us through every created thing. Doubts about God and Jesus and the Bible are a normal part of life. Doubt can happen to the best of us. But 9 times out of 10, when I'm struggling with doubt, I've lost sight of all of the miracles that are in my reality. And I start thinking, well, I'm normal, and I get to define what else is normal in the universe. I am this small person, but I think I can see everything. And those great claims about this God who made it all, it seems a little far-fetched. Who am I to go there when I am physically just a speck of dust, just a miracle who happens to reside in a jar of clay? Now, I'm rightfully assuming this morning that most of you in here today already believe. You have faith. And you've had personal experiences with the God of the universe, right? That's how we got into this. Maybe it was at a camp when you were young, or at a retreat, or when you read the Word of God, or when you had someone share with you the story of God's love. I'm not speaking to a group of atheists this morning who need to make that next step into the place of being agnostic. I'm preaching mostly to the elect. I'm speaking to brothers and sisters in Christ, not just friends who attend the same worship service. So I want to turn our attention to the dangers of doubt for the Christian. As a Christian, I can remember specific times in my life where doubt snuck up on me. It's not a pleasant visitor when doubt ambushes you. I hate it. But the first week after I got saved, I found myself asking all these questions. Wow, were all those things that I felt real? Those kinds of things. Other times, more recently, I've got done with a busy season of ministry. I've finally gotten a moment of rest, and I've come down with a short-term doubt flu, where I'm doubled over and I think this thought. I keep preaching to large groups of people. What if what I'm sharing is a lie? What if it's not true? And I have to work backwards. I go back to creation and work my way up. The older I get, the more I grow close to Jesus, the less often these seasons of doubt come, and the emotions are of much less intensity that's associated with that doubt. Why is that? The closer I get and the older I get, why is the doubt shrinking? Why are those seasons not happening as regularly? Because God's real. Because time and time again, He has proven Himself faithful to me. And so I have less and less reasons to doubt Him. And it's happening hardly ever at all now because I have a real relationship with Him, where I talk with Him and I do life with Him. Ask me if my relationship with my wife, Libby, is real. Ask me if my relationship with my kids is real. Ask me if my relationship with Jesus is real. And the answer is yes, of course. They're all real. Now, as a pastor, I get a really unique opportunity to talk with lots of people as they're trying to process life, as they're trying to see clear reality, and as they're trying to fathom this reality that they have an eternal soul. Because I'm a human being myself and have to work through these issues, and because I've been working as a pastor pretty much since I got saved at the age of 18, I have learned that doubt is a normal part of the human condition. Doubts don't freak me out. I look at them as opportunities now. And doubts don't freak me out because the truth is truth. Truth is not influenced by my lack of belief or my lack of faith in the truth. Truth isn't going anywhere just because I'm having a bad day. The reality of God, the reality of His amazing love, the reality of our Savior Jesus isn't affected by my feelings of belief or my feelings of disbelief. God is God, whether you can see Him or not. That's our problem, not His. He exists, and He cares. I used to say this to my college kids back in Paradise all the time. He's not hiding from you. He wants you to find Him. Let's begin by opening our eyes and go up from there. In my 20-plus years of pastoral experience, doubts only become dangerous when we don't deal with them. Doubts become dangerous to us when we allow them to get us stuck in the mud. I was thinking doubts are kind of like quicksand. If you don't panic and you deal with it, you can get out of it. If you just sit there and you start to panic, you go down pretty fast. We can be running the race of faith, and a doubt sometimes can come on us like a side ache. And so it can get us to slow down. And if we don't deal with it, eventually we will come to a stop. And if you come to a stop, you might even turn around and start walking away from God because you didn't deal with that doubt. And if you get to a point with your doubt where you're turning around and you're walking away from God, that is not going to go well. That is not going to go well. You do realize that the universe is rigged, right? You realize the universe is rigged. God set it up so that no one can find life or deep peace in anything except Him. So if doubt causes you to turn and walk away, you don't deal with it, it's going to end badly. Paul wrote, "Do not be deceived. God cannot be mocked. A man reaps what he sows." You don't want to believe in God and His Word? You don't want to take to heart that selfishness makes you miserable, that selfishness leaves you empty, go ahead and walk that road. Before you even know it, you're going to wind up empty and angry and bitter and miserable every time. And if you're sitting out here this morning and you're feeling empty and angry and bitter and honestly miserable, I would bet all the money I have it's because you've tried to follow selfishness instead of the living God, and you don't like where you ended up, because God has the universe rigged. So don't let doubt knock you off your course. Don't let doubt steal your spiritual momentum. Don't let doubts bring your faith level down to where you start putting one foot in the world just in case. I'm going to try to get a little bit of that in case that's the right way, and a little bit in the kingdom. That's a great way to get yourself torn into two pieces. Like all fear, the only way to deal with doubt is to face it. Face it head on. I think doubt is actually a tragic and sad form of fear. Doubt is hard because we so badly want everything about God and His Word to be true. Our hopes are up. Oh, this is awesome. This God is awesome. And then we have this little voice in the back of our heads, don't we, saying, but what if? What if? What if it's not true? What if it's just a lie? What if you turn out to be a fool? The name Satan actually means accuser. Did you know that? Satan is basically a lawyer, a nasty lawyer. One job certain lawyers have is to create doubt. That's their job. A defense attorney's job, all they have to do is convince a few jury members to have a reasonable doubt, and they can win the case. But I'm sure a lot of defense attorneys have figured out their job is only to cause doubt. Doubt kind of works its way through, and if it's not dealt with, it can pollute the whole thing. It can pollute justice. Satan is the master at getting us to doubt, and his favorite words are, what if? But what if? What if? What would you do if you found on the southern wall of your house a termite nest just getting started? Would you ignore those termites, or would you deal with it as fast as you could? You'd be smart to deal with it, wouldn't you? What if you just ignored the termite nest? That's annoying, but I'm going to ignore it. Well, eventually your whole house could come tumbling down on top of you, right? Same thing with doubt. Deal with it right away. The number one problem that I think Christians have with doubt today, they're just too lazy to deal with them. Oh, that's a tough question. I'll worry about it later. Maybe Pastor will talk about it in a sermon series someday. I don't want to do the work to get the answer. How can a good God allow bad things? That causes people to doubt, doesn't it? Maybe it's you. Have you read any books on that subject by good authors? People who are smart enough to articulate it for people like you and me so that we can understand what in the world is going on in the world? Why did God allow Joshua to wipe out, and I put this in quotes, whole nations on his way through the promised land? There's really good explanations to that question. But I have a relative who I love who has let that issue keep him from faith in God. And he'll say to me, this is why I don't believe, man. Have you actually read the whole book of Joshua? Have you actually read the book before and after Joshua? Have you done any research on what is going on there? No. That little doubt has become a platform that friend of mine is standing on to his peril. How can I know that the Bible is true? How can I let Scripture be the authoritative guide in my life if I doubt if everything in there is historically accurate? Have you looked into the good scholarship on that issue? I've been blessed to do more than just study it. I've gone to Israel and seen with my own eyes. It says it in the Bible, and I've stood right on it in Israel. Doubt is uncomfortable. I hate it. But I've learned to see it as an opportunity to fill in a knowledge gap that I have about God. And sometimes it's a faith gap. Sometimes God just wants me to trust Him and step through whatever it is. And then when I get to the other side, I look back and He shows me what I wanted to see. Don't ignore your doubts. several years ago, and my kids were young when this situation took place. It was a spring day, kind of like the weather we've been having. It's starting to get warm. And you know, summer is almost upon us, right? I went outside my door through the garage, and right in the middle of the driveway, I saw one of my worst fears. A rattlesnake was just moseying into my yard, making its way down to the basketball court where my kids always played and where they always rode their bikes. And I got that instant jolt of adrenaline. Yesterday I was on a walk in the desert and I saw a dead rattlesnake, and I felt that same jolt, man. Those things are freaky. But here, at my house, in the flesh, was this deadly rattlesnake. And fight or flight kicked in. And I'll be honest, I turned and I set a land speed record in the 40-yard dash. I could have been drafted in the NFL draft for my 40 time. Right before I made it into safe territory, which is inside my house, I froze. And it was my love for my kids that stopped me in my tracks. What if I leave that snake alone and it goes down into the basketball court area where my kids always play? And what if one of my sweet little kids is bitten? What would I do? I'll tell you what I did. I stood there like a statue for a solid 2 minutes, weighing this out. And then I set my mind, I'm going to have to face this thing. And if any of you in here are big snake people, I apologize for the gory details that are about to. I went to the corner of my garage and I grabbed the longest handled garden shovel I could find, and I did mental calculation. Could I duct tape some more handles to that? I don't think there's time. I approached the snake cautiously. I lined up the blade of the shovel right above its head, and I struck that rattlesnake right behind the neck. And once I had its head pinned to the ground, all of that fear and all that adrenaline helped me make sure he wasn't moving anymore. And then I stood there in shock and relief. It was over. Myself and my kids would be safe. Personally, I was pretty proud I made a good choice there. Otherwise, it would be an all-time epic wimp out that I'd have to deal with. But that's the attitude that I want us to have when it comes to these doubts. When doubts come in, when the enemy's saying, but what if? I want us to say, no, not in my house, not in my life. I will do whatever I need to do to keep my faith in God as strong as I can. I am not going to let my momentary blindness slow me down. I am going to face my fears. I am going to face this doubt. I am going to seek an answer to this question. I'm going to close the knowledge gap that I evidently have here because I don't understand. The cure for doubt, the cure for fear is faith. Ultimately, you are still going to have to choose to trust Him because there are some questions we're not going to get answers to until we get to the other side. But when you've trusted God with every area of your life, and there's a couple that you're still kind of cloudy on, maybe a week needs to go by, like it did for Thomas. Maybe a whole bunch of weeks need to go by, who knows? But when you've given God everything and you see how faithful He's being, when you have one or two areas where there's confusion, it's not hard to trust. But the cure for fear is ultimately going to be faith. You're going to have to choose to trust. To close, I want to encourage you. When doubt shows up, don't throw a fit. Just like you shouldn't throw a fit if you fall into quicksand. The fact that we could doubt God's existence sometimes causes us to doubt. How do I not know for sure this is God we're talking about? If we have to have faith, how is this real? I want to end with Jesus' words this morning. Stop doubting and believe. Don't be stuck in that mud pit anymore, flopping around complaining that you have this doubt. Go figure it out. Stop doubting and believe. Let's pray.